everyone. I'm waiting for a few people to join and then we will start. I see that Jack is already here, so we're going to start in a few minutes, in a few seconds. Okay. Um, yeah, so today we'll be talking about data science and all things data science or data analytics. So I'm excited to hear from Jack. I think Jack, if you're ready, feel free to request to join. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, she's joining, so that's exciting.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. How is it in why are you you're in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, I'm right now in San Francisco. It's
Mm-hmm.
well, it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
foggy here right now, but otherwise, yeah, it's Pride weekend in San Francisco, and there's a huge kind of like gay community, so that's it's been a really fun weekend.
Oh yeah, because of all the things are happening this weekend. That's amazing.
Yeah, where are
Mhm.
you based?
I'm currently in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think you're ready to start, right?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm excited. Thank you so much for inviting me, by the way.
And thank you for accepting to do this. I'm excited to hear from you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I want you to like start by introducing yourself, like what you do, and yeah, because there's people here who would want to know that. So. Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone, I'm Jack. I'm currently working at Palantir, which is a big tech company, and working there as a data product manager. Before that, I worked as a data scientist at Lyft, and generally, kind of like my academic background is in industrial engineering and data analytics. And yeah, besides kind of like working in the tech industry, I also have an Instagram channel, which I'm like really passionate about. And yeah, a huge diversity advocate as well. So just a couple of things about myself.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so we know that you are in the data world in tech, right?
Yes.
So I want us to like talk about your background, like let's say like 5 years or 10 years ago, did you think that you would be pursuing this trajectory, like this path? So you can tell us about your education history, like how you came to like get into data science. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And the short answer to your question is no. I like 5, 10 years ago, if someone would have told me I'll end up in the data space, I would have said no way. Actually, I probably wouldn't have even known like what that means, data science or the data field. So definitely nothing that I planned like early on in my career or during high school.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like where I started, I was always interested in a lot of different fields. In school, I was interested in physics and in science overall. I was interested in business and politics. And so, kind of like what I tried to do during my bachelor's degree was study something where I can study a lot of different aspects. And so, I think the best translation, I studied in Germany, but the best translation is probably industrial engineering, which has a lot of these aspects like some statistics aspects, but also business aspects. And particularly in Germany, you can also pick like an engineering focus. And so I picked electrical engineering.
Uh-huh.
And so all of this had nothing to do with data science and data analytics.
Yeah.
So definitely like at the start of my career, I didn't know about this. And also coming from Germany, like 10 years ago, 5, 10 years ago, tech was not a big thing in Germany. Like there were not a lot of big tech companies. I mean, still there probably aren't that as many as in the US. And so I personally also didn't know anyone who worked in the tech field or who studied something tech related.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was also like one thing. I just didn't have exposure to that.
Yeah.
And so kind of like started out within the industrial engineering field.
Interesting. So after your undergrad, so how did you I know you pursued a master's, so is that where you chose to like switch to data science? Like how was that experience and why did you choose to do that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it kind of like happened randomly, because I was open for like new opportunities. But after my undergrad and also during my undergrad, I worked at a German company in product development. So I had a little bit of exposure to the product world, product management, and I found that exciting. However, it was like a very traditional German manufacturing company, and very hierarchical, very slow moving. And so I quickly realized like that's not the right environment for me to like learn stuff and grow. And also that's why I mainly decided to do a master's and also to like move abroad to the US, because I knew that there was like much more going on in the tech field here. And so while choosing that master, I mainly looked for industrial engineering, given that that's what I've done in my bachelor's, given that what's what I was used to. And so started my my master's in industrial engineering in Berkeley. But luckily, they had a big focus on data analytics and data science in that program. And so it kind of like randomly happened that I was exposed to data science, exposed to data analytics, and then started to like the field and get to know it. So for me personally, it was not something that I planned or that I particularly like looked for. It kind of just like happened along the way, and I liked the opportunity.
Yeah, so like thinking about the whole aspect of moving to a new country, I must imagine that it was quite very different. I mean, Germany and the United States are very different places, very different languages. I must imagine the education was also very different. So how did you navigate the whole transition and the whole experience? Because,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, they're both like Western countries, so I feel like they share a lot of like common values in their culture, but there are also a lot of differences as well. Especially like language, like when you talk about like social norms, it's actually fairly different to Germany. And of course, some of the values are also pretty different. So I studied abroad also during my bachelor's, so I felt like I was used to it already a little bit, to like getting used to like a different culture and getting to know a different culture. I actually studied in Scotland for a semester, and I had a summer school in the US. So I felt like I had a little bit of exposure already of what to expect. But still, I think what was important to me was just like to kind of like keep an open mind and treat this as a learning experience. And I mean, in the beginning, especially, I was like very scared to like speak up in classes because my English was not as good. Also because I didn't know if like how I present things or how I say things would kind of like fit the cultural norm in the US. But I feel like over time, like I just got like more used to it. And also, I think one thing to always keep in mind if you're like an international student or someone working from another country in the US or some other country, I don't know, you're so brave already. Like it's such a like brave step. And so you shouldn't like hide behind, or you shouldn't have to hide behind maybe your language not being as good. It's okay. You already made like such a big step that a lot of other people didn't take. And yeah, so that kind of like gave me some mental peace to be like, hey, you already did such a brave thing. You already did such a good next step. Like it's okay if you mess up a little bit when you speaking English, like it's okay. And that helped me a little bit as well.
All right, so you took 1 year in Berkeley, right? So after like, let's say when you were about to like finish your degree, and I think like that's the period when people like start thinking about what next, and you start thinking about, okay, so now I need to like get a job. I need to start thinking about applying for a career, like a job in this field. So did you specifically want to get into data science, like data science careers? And did you specifically want to work in the United States? Because I know being an international student, it can be hard navigating that. So like, I wanted to talk about the whole experience, the whole job application process and the whole interview process.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for me, I had a couple of like spaces I was interested in. First of all, I wanted to like work close to tech somehow. So that was important to me. And then I was either interested in like consulting or data science. So those were the two areas that I was looking into. But in the end, decided to go with the data science route for a couple of reasons. But mainly I got like an opportunity there. And so I kind of like took it. I think maybe if I would have gotten a consulting opportunity sooner, maybe I would have taken that. And that's also like one common thing throughout my career, that I think a lot of these things weren't planned. They just happen along the way. And that's also like one piece of advice I want to give to like everyone listening is that it's okay to not plan everything and to just take things as they come. You will always have the chance to like change things if you don't like it, and switch companies or switch roles or switch industries. And so don't be too hard on yourself if like you have like this perfect dream role in mind. If that's not your first role you're getting, you can always like switch and change roles. And so for me, basically, I got my first job in data analytics at Lyft. And that's also like one of the key reasons why I ended up in the data science field. So again, it was not something that I planned for a long time. But yeah, I can talk a little bit more about like the application process if you're interested.
Yeah, sure, please do.
Yeah, so I feel like in the US and also in tech, it's like having a network is super important. And that's something I only realized after applying online for a lot of companies and not hearing back from them. And it's very different to like Germany, where I am from, where I feel like everything goes through, or most of the applications are going through online applications, and you don't necessarily need a network. Whereas in tech in the US, having a network is super important to get a job. And so for me as a German who didn't know anyone in the US, who didn't have like family, friends who could like refer me, that was like one key lesson to learn. And so how I did it is basically I went to a lot of events, like alumni events from my university, career events, and just like tech talks, and try to like build a network there. And that's also how I got my job at Lyft, actually. I was attending a guest lecture at UC Berkeley, and someone from Lyft was basically there from the analytics team giving a lecture. And then after the lecture, I just went up to that person and was like, hey, I'm super interested in data analytics. Lyft sounds like an amazing company. Can you maybe help me make an introduction? And that this person actually helped me. And that's kind of like how I got my job there. So I think just like building this network, getting to know people who already have jobs in tech is super important to get your first job. But the good news is that it gets easier. Once you have the first tech job, it gets much, much easier to kind of like find the second one.
Yeah, interesting. So I don't know much about data science. So feel free to tell us about the interview process. I know software engineering interviews are really code-based. So like how are data science interviews? Like how did you prepare for that? How was the experience like?
Yeah. So I think it depends a little bit. Data science is also like such a broad field. It depends like where on the spectrum you want to apply. So I feel like there's like the more data analytics, data analysis part, which actually was where I was focusing on. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's probably like machine learning engineer, and that's very like close to software engineering. And so I was a little bit more on the data analytics part. And so I think the typical interview process for that role is that you first have a recruiter screen with a recruiter that asks you like general questions about your resume, why are you interested in that company, why are you interested in that role. After that, you typically have an interview with a data scientist, and they will also, again, ask you some like motivational questions, some behavioral questions, but they might also ask you like a case study. And a case study can be everything from, hey, let's say you build a new product, how would you measure success in that product? So coming up with like these metrics, they just want to see that you kind of like can think analytically. That's really important for the data analytics interview. Sometimes they might already ask you like a coding question there as well if you apply for a more like machine learning heavy role. And then after that, actually at Lyft, especially for a lot of like entry level positions, they might give you like a homework assignment. So you basically get a couple of data sets. You get like a broad question. For me, it was, I think, how would you determine customer churn? And then it's up to you to build models, work with the data, and basically like send them a presentation of what you would do. So that was like the case for me at Lyft. It really depends on company to company if they have such a like take-home assignment. And then after that, you will get an on-site interview. Those are like a couple of interviews, typically one interview about your resume and behavioral questions, another interview about some statistics questions, so more like theoretical, For example, like how would you set up an A/B test, or asking you about like confidence intervals, things like that. So statistical concepts. For me, because I was applying for data analytics, it was also an interview like that had a business case. So they also wanted to make sure that I like have some business acumen and understand business as a general. So similar to like consulting case studies, I had like a case study there as well. And then my fourth interview, let me think about that. Oh yeah, that was like a SQL interview. So just making sure that actually it didn't matter if it was SQL, just some sort of coding language. I could pick Python, SQL, or even actually I didn't know any coding language really well at that point. It was enough to like logically walk through your thought process, because they want to make sure you know how to work with data and you know how you would analyze these things. So that was like that's like how a typical process goes, and it's a long process, unfortunately.
It is.
Especially for US tech companies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of like what I experienced.
Yeah, so this is interesting, but do you feel like having worked in Germany somehow prepared you for the like career world here in the United States, or were they different?
That's a good question. I would say overall, no, not really. Not that much, because working in the US is pretty different from working in Germany in a lot of different aspects. The interview process is pretty different. How you get jobs is like pretty different. And then even I would say the corporate culture is like fairly different, where, especially in the tech world, where in Germany, like things are pretty much like very hierarchical, very process oriented. There's like documentation for everything, kind of. And it's also very like, you also have like a lot of like work-life balance in Germany. And then the US, especially in the tech world, I feel like you are in more ambiguous situations oftentimes, where you don't have like the exact tasks you need to do, but you need to actually think through more of like, what do I want to do next, which I personally find much more exciting to do. But there are also downsides. Like I feel like work-life balance in working in the US is worse, to be honest. There are not that many holidays. People just general have like a different works ethics than compared to Germany. So there were a lot of things that I kind of like needed to adjust to and get used to.
Yeah. All right. So now after like getting the job, could you like tell us about a normal day in the life of a data scientist? I know like you could just tell us about what you were doing, and if you can explain to us about the different like data science experience. I know like most people here probably don't know about that data analytics and data science, machine learning, people have very different experiences. So you can tell us about your normal day in the life, like when you joined Lyft, for example.
Yeah, for sure. So I personally, like, I was embedded in a product team. So I was basically doing data analytics for a product team. And so what that meant is I worked really closely with a product manager, with several software engineers, with a like designer, and maybe other data scientists as well. And so typically, like I, for example, was working on the passenger app. I don't know how many people know Lyft here, but Lyft is like a ride-sharing app. So you have like the passengers and you have the drivers, and it's basically a marketplace. And I was working on the passenger side of things. And so a couple of problems that I was working on the passenger side of things was like, how can we make sure that passengers find the right pickup location? So if you type in your location in the app, how can we make sure that the driver and the passenger meet each other very, very easily? And it might seem like an easy problem, but it's actually fairly difficult, because there are two parties involved. There's like the driver, there's the passenger. There are like maps involved, there's GPS problems, there are like all different kinds of things. And so that was like a big area that I focused on. And so typically what I've done as a data analyst there, or data scientist there, was first of all doing a lot of exploratory analysis on how can we improve the product, what opportunities do I see, for example, in the passenger app, where do people maybe drop off, and where do people like close the app and not request a ride, what's the cancel rates, what are the reasons people cancel a ride, like just analyzing these things and finding patterns and problems that we can fix in the product. So that's probably like a big chunk of what I've done. And then the other thing is kind of like translating these insights into actual like features or into actual like product requests. And for that, I work closely with the engineers, with the product manager on thinking through how can we fix that problem in the product, and how could that look like. And then I think the third step was basically doing testing and experimenting. So instead of like just rolling out that feature to everyone at once, it's basically like A/B testing that feature and seeing if that actually has the right effect. So thinking through like, how do we set up an experiment to measure this? For how long should we run that experiment? And then also analyzing if we can see kind of like significant changes and then the success metrics. So those are like big three areas that I worked at. Again, I was more on the data analytics side. I think if you would be more on the machine learning side of things, it would look very similar, only that kind of like on top of that, you would also build models for the product. So for example, if you think about Lyft, the ride sharing app, usually when you open the app, you see a couple of like locations that are suggested to you, and that is backed by a machine learning model. So if you're more on the machine learning side, that might be like one thing you work on. Yeah, so those are a couple of things.
That's very interesting. So I want us to now talk about career growth. So after like spending some time in Lyft, you definitely chose to pursue another job at Palantir, right? I think you're the like a data lead, like your role is more of like diverse in that you also do product management. So would you like to tell us about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I think like throughout my time at Lyft, because I was working so closely with product managers, I found that role really interesting, because I mean, I love data, but it was also like really interesting to think through the product, to think through like who are the users for this app, and really kind of like build a roadmap or a vision for what you can build. And that role just seemed like super exciting to me. And so kind of like for my next step, I wanted to work on something where still I'm close to data. So still I wanted to keep the data science aspect of it, but get a little bit closer to actually having ownership of building the product, of thinking through what can be useful for users. And so that's kind of like my role right now at Palantir. And for everyone who doesn't know Palantir is basically like an enterprise software. We work with a lot of big organizations and help them solve problems with data. And so typically we like partner up with the users at those companies. We figure out what are your problems, how can we help you? And then my job is basically to have those conversations, have those workshops, scope what a product could look like, and then solve that with data. So I have a couple of engineers and data scientists that I work with to implement that. But still, because it's a data platform, naturally the implementation is very data heavy. And so that's still like that's why I'm still very close to that data part, which I like.
Okay, interesting. So how did you find transitioning the like different companies, like the almost like similar but different roles?
Yeah.
How was that experience like for you?
I think it was really interesting. I mean, I'm still like early in my career, so I love to like just learn new things and get exposed to new things, to also just for myself figure out what do I really like, instead of just like staying within the fields that I got my first job in or that I studied. I always wanted to like explore different areas, because you have to work for like a long time probably. So just really figuring out like what do I enjoy, what do I like doing, was important to me. And so that's why, of course, there were a lot of new things coming, like working at a new company, like learning about the company culture, learning about the role, learning about the product. But I think that was just like exciting to me, actually. It was like a positive thing to just have exposure to new stuff. But definitely it was like a difficult transition, because Lyft is such a consumer facing company, versus then Palantir was more like a B2B software company. So like naturally these companies just function very differently. And so, yeah, it took some time to get adjusted to that. But I feel like now overall, going forward, if I now apply for a new job or whatever, like maybe want to start my company at some point, it was very useful for me to have the exposure to both B2B and B2C, because I now feel like comfortable and confident in both areas. And so I think it was like a good learning experience, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So what are the tips that you would like, looking back, what do you think that, what have you done that has really helped you succeed in your career, or like what has really helped you to advance and grow? Like, what would you say has really helped you do that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I mentioned before is like having a network really helps. Um, and that I have to say that was really not natural to me in the beginning. I mean, I don't know how much you know about German culture, but Germans are typically like not very good at networking. They are really bad at small talk. So it was something that I needed to learn.
Yeah.
But I think networking honestly was super important for me to get like my first role. And even within doing networking within the company you work at is super important. So it doesn't end at like getting a job. It's also like meeting different people at your company, knowing about what are the problems of your stakeholders, and trying to like make life easier for them is also super important to like get like advocates and fans within your own organization. So I feel like it doesn't end at just having networking within tech. It also has to be within your company. And so I feel like that was pretty important for me in yeah, my career so far. I think the other thing as well is just not stressing too much about titles or roles or like having a perfect plan. I think just like being open for new opportunities, and yeah, if like a recruiter reaches out to you and has something interesting for you, even if it's not in your plan, just be open for that, for example. I
Yeah.
felt was like really important for me to just like explore new things and learn new things. I think those are like my two biggest tips probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important to be open-minded because, I mean, things change very
Yeah.
fast in life. So
Yeah.
that's a very good tip. Yeah. Okay, so now I want to talk about something else. I read about something very interesting about you, that you were the only female in your bachelor's, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we know that not many women are in STEM. So um, you get to have very different experiences, for example. So would you mind like telling us how it has been as a woman in STEM? Like, how did you navigate this space? I can imagine like being the only woman in a class could be intimidating sometimes, but how did you go through that, and how have you managed to go through that in the workspaces as well? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I was the only woman in my bachelor's, but I feel like it's still like a big problem as well in the tech industry overall. So even working at tech companies, I'm still like most of the times, I mean, you can probably relate to this, like
Yeah.
the only woman in the room, which is not ideal for many reasons. But I think like how I handled this, it was a learning experience for me. And I felt like in the beginning, I actually handled it the wrong way, where people gave me a lot of advice of like, I call it like being more like a man, basically like trying to, I don't know, take on like the different gestures and facial expressions that maybe a man would have in that situation. And kind of like almost changing my character or my values to be more man-like. And I have to say it was like not super unsuccessful, but also it was super exhausting. Just having like trying to be that different person all the time, and trying to like be loud and when I didn't want to be or didn't feel like it. And so that's like a piece of advice I got a lot of time in my early career, to like be more like a man, adjust more to like whatever is like, I mean, they didn't say be more like a man, but
Yeah, but
in the end it was like taking the behaviors and maybe the kind of language that is more associated with males, just because that is kind of like what a lot of people are more used to and define as successful. And so just naturally, that was also something that I did a lot in my early career. But I think now that I like have more experience and also I'm more confident with my skill set and with myself, I think that's a wrong approach to things. And it should be just to kind of like create a culture in a workplace where everyone is welcomed, not only women and men, but like every kind of like minority feels welcomed. And no matter kind of like what character you have, you should be able to feel welcomed and bring your skill set to the table. And so I think like how I manage things now is much different. When I join a new team, I want to make sure that there's like the right culture on that team, that everyone feels comfortable sharing things, that everyone feels included. Now, actually, at my current company, I have like a leadership role. I lead a team, so making sure that like everyone on my team feels like they can voice their opinion in whatever way they're comfortable. Some people might be comfortable saying that in meetings. Some people might be more comfortable writing down a document or sending things on Slack. And so being open for like the different ways of communication is in my opinion, like the better way to approach things.
Yeah.
And then also I think over time, I just got more confident. Like when I hear maybe a comment from someone else that I think is offending, or just calling them out in some way. It doesn't have to be like calling them out directly in that meeting.
Yeah.
It can be like sending them a message afterwards, like, hey, I didn't feel like comfortable with what you were saying. Or even sometimes what I use now is the technique of like questioning their comment. So if someone like says something, it's just asking like, what do you mean by that? Because then oftentimes they also realize, oh, actually, yeah, that was not appropriate.
Yeah.
So I think like,
yeah,
that's probably my strategy now, like being very honest and open about what values I have and what is important to me, and then also creating a culture of where, everyone feels like comfortable on a team.
Yeah, I mean, that's very important. I feel like everyone deserves to be heard, and everyone, that's a very nice tip and nice thing. Okay, so now I know like people glorify like jobs in tech. People think that it's all nice, it's all amazing, you know, which is, I mean, which is good, because I mean, I love what I do, you love what you do. It's an amazing career, but we know that sometimes there is burnout. There is moments where you're like, oh my god, I'm tired. So how do you navigate that, such days?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, there are like a lot of benefits of working in tech, and I think you mentioned some of them already. Like you can have great impact. Tech is becoming so important. I mean, the COVID crisis kind of like showed of how tech can really be like super important. And also just looking forward, tech will only become more important in the future as well. So just working on something that's so impactful is super exciting. And then obviously also there are other benefits like pay, culture of the company, blah, blah. But yeah, as you said, there are also some downsides. And I feel like, especially on Instagram, sometimes people don't talk about it as much because you want to like glorify the tech industry. But there are some downsides. And I think the biggest one is probably that it's easy to get burned out, that it's easy to like get overwhelmed with like the amount you need to learn every time, because tech is changing all the time. And also a lot of expectations. There are these rigorous interview processes. They're there for a reason, because there are a lot of expectations on people, no matter what role, data science or software engineer, doesn't matter. There are just like high expectations and a lot of pressure. And so definitely like I struggled with that as well sometimes, just being like super overwhelmed or feeling super burned out. I think what helps me is to, in these situations, like take a step back and either, if it's possible, like taking some time off just to, you know, like get adjusted again about like what really matters here and what is just artificial pressure that I put on myself right now. And if that's not possible, like just setting boundaries also within your company of like how many hours you want to work, what's behavior that you accept versus not, like setting these boundaries is super important. But I think sometimes, and I personally like didn't leave Lyft because I was burned out, but I know people like sometimes the only way to change this is also by like switching jobs or switching companies to just kind of like get a full reset of everything. But yeah, it's definitely like, I think it's a common problem, and I hope that this is something that also gets addressed within the tech industry more in the future, to make sure like work-life balance is a priority, and to make sure that if people feel burned out, there are ways to help these people feeling more inspired and motivated again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so now I want to talk about like you started like blogging about tech, right? Which is very awesome, which is how I got to know about you, and now you're doing this, which is very amazing. So what inspired you to like start doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because before that, I never really used Instagram or social media that much, I have to say. And I actually, maybe I was like one of the judgy persons who was like, oh, these influencers, like, what are they doing? But I think how it started was that it was a combination of like me. I felt like I was at the point where I like experienced a couple of things, like where I went through a couple of steps in my career, that I just wanted to share some of the learnings that I had along the way. together with, I started it during COVID, during lockdown. And honestly, it was a big factor of, I think, why I really started this was that I was bored and there was not that much to do outside of work. And so it was just like another outlet for me to be creative or do something else besides work. And so I think the combination of those two things, I had some ideas of what I want to share. Plus, I had the free time at hand, and yeah, what like kind of like led me to just trying this out. And I didn't think that actually people would follow me. For me, it was more like an experiment in the beginning to just post some stuff, see if it interests people, and do this for fun. And still now I'm like only doing this for fun. I'm not doing this to monetize it or something. It's just for me like a way to do especially like I create a lot of reels, and that's just like fun to me. I don't know, to think about like what to produce there. So that's kind of like the main reason for me.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's amazing that you are doing it for fun, but it is impacting people out there. Like, probably people get to see it and be like, oh, I relate to that, or that is amazing. That's some very nice advice. So,
and I think also like one thing that really kept me doing that, and I say that and I haven't posted in a while because of several reasons, but there's like an amazing community here. Like I feel like the tech space on Instagram, I didn't know that this community existed before, but it's just amazing like how many cool content creators out there, like how many people are commenting my posts and like reaching out to me. It's just like amazing to have that community, and I think that's also like one reason why I like kept doing it over time. Was just to like meet these people and chat and get other perspectives.
And so I know you've said that you do it for fun, but there is times where you're like, you have to like manage like work and social media. I mean, social media is a bubble whereby if you're not careful, you can. So how do you navigate that, the whole aspect of working full time and content creation on the side? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I have to say, I think I haven't figured it out yet, to be super honest. I think during the pandemic it was easier for me because there was work, and then at least in Germany, I was in Germany during the pandemic, like nothing was open. Like I couldn't even go to the gym, like there was nothing. And so I felt like it was easier for me to find like an hour or two per day where I could that I could dedicate to social media or to Instagram and produce stuff. Versus now, I think it's becoming more difficult as like everything is opening up again. There's so many friends that I haven't seen in a while that I want to see. I can go to the gym again, and so now I feel like it's a little more difficult for me to find the time to do Instagram, especially because like for me it's like purely fun. It's not, I don't see it as like a job right now or a way to monetize it or so. And so finding time for that right now is sometimes challenging for me. But yeah, I hope I can find a better balance and post more in the coming weeks. But yeah, I have to say I haven't like fully figured it out yet. Yeah.
Interesting. I think it's important that you say, it's very amazing like to have a life outside all these things. Would you like to tell us the things that you enjoy doing outside work?
Oh yeah.
Outside.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love like outdoors and nature. So what I do in my free time a lot is just either going to the park or going hiking, going camping. Like those are things that really kind of like excite me. Besides that, it's probably kind of like I like going to workout classes and just doing like sports in general. So that's also something I enjoy. And then just like, you know, the usual stuff like hanging out with friends, I don't know, watching a movie with friends, going to dinner. And I feel like even now, like after the pandemic especially, I just appreciate these things so much more, where before like going out to dinner with some friends you took kind of like as given. But yeah, I really kind of like want to do these things now and just appreciate them more. But yeah, those are a couple of things I really enjoy doing besides Instagram. I'm curious, how do you kind of like manage to keep a balance? Because also for everyone out here, like posting content, it looks like it takes a couple of minutes, but it really takes a
lot of time.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think I'll figure it out. It's not easy. I mean, at this rate, I think I'm just going by the day and just seeing how it goes.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I think
Hopefully
that's
I
the
can
right
be.
way to do it, to not give
Mhm.
yourself like pressure, because there were times where I was like, oh no, I need to post like at least 5, 6 things a week. Now I'm like, I post things when I have something to say, and
Yeah.
and I think also that's probably better for everyone, because then like I think the content is also higher quality probably. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. So the other thing I want to ask, so if you were not in like in the other ideal life, if you're not in data science or if you're not in like the tech world, what do you think you'd be doing? Like,
Yeah,
what would
that's a
be the
that's a
ideal
good
career?
question. There are a couple of things that excite me, and maybe actually I will move to these fields eventually. I
Uh-huh.
think one is politics, and it doesn't have to mean like I want to be like a famous politician, but more, there's so many topics that I feel like deserve more attention, like women's rights, or generally like minority rights, and every kind of like minority, that I feel like I definitely want to spend more time on that at some point in my life, to maybe when I have like more money,
Yeah.
or have spent some time building my career, just
Uh-huh.
maybe like building a scholarship for people, because I think like education is one key to change this. um, so building a scholarship, or just like like engaging more in those things. So I think politics is definitely something I'm very interested in and passionate about. The other thing is also like, I think psychology I find super interesting, and sometimes in data science actually there are a lot of like psychology things also playing in, especially if you like experiment on apps on like user behavior. It's super interesting sometimes to like how people think and what experiment is winning. So I think something I might also want to do at some point is like learning more about psychology, and maybe, I don't know if I want to like start a full-time career in that field, but it's definitely, I think, like something that's super interesting to me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are two very interesting fields. Yeah. I can't wait to see you pursue politics.
Yeah,
That,
let's see.
that would be awesome. Yeah. Yes, I think the final thing I'll just want to ask you would be like, what advice would you give someone who wants to get into data science, like someone who just wants to pursue a career in tech or a career in data science? What advice would you give them? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I already gave like the network advice, and
Yeah,
the
then I
like
talking.
being open and not
Oh
pressure
yeah.
yourself. But another thing I think specifically for data science that is important, you can easily be in that trap where you try to learn like all coding languages that are important for data science and all statistical concepts, and that's not as important. It's much more important to like start learning it in a practical way. So doing projects, and this can be anything. It could be if you have some data on your own, financial data, whatever, that you want to analyze, like doing some projects on that. Or if you have a nonprofit or a university group that you can like work with, just like getting practical experience as soon as possible, I think is key. And that's also what companies are looking for. Like, yes, these theoretical skills like SQL, Python, statistics are important, and you should have the basics of that. But you can also learn some of these things on the job. I think what the companies are looking for are like, can you actually implement something in real life? Can you like communicate and do these things actually on real life examples? And so I would say like as soon as possible, like trying to get some data science or data analytics project in the real world, and work on them is super important. And as I said, it could be anything: internships, university groups. If
Yeah.
you Kaggle has a lot of like projects, like just trying out these things, and maybe working with some people and seeing if what you've built is useful. I would focus on that as soon as possible. That's, I think, my one piece of advice for data science.
Awesome. Are you free to like take a few questions from
Yeah,
people?
I can do like maybe 5, 10 more minutes if there are any questions.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So someone just asked about did you have projects when you were applying for a data science role? I know projects are very important in software engineering. So did you like have projects on your resume or something like that?
Yeah, so basically in my master's project, we had like a capstone project, which was related to data science. So for 1 year, we're basically throughout that master's program, working in a team of 4 people and
Mhm.
tackling kind of like a data science project together with a company. So that was like one thing I had on my resume. I think the other thing that also helped is that I worked in Germany before, as a product developer. So I had some like work experience before as well that I put on there, So those are, I think, the two biggest examples. And then of course, like I had some like projects and coursework as well that I put on my resume as well. And that's fine as well. Like if you do projects as part of like your university program, put these on your resume. Like these also count as like practical experience if you actually do something. Another thing as well that is not related to data science, but helped me also, I think, get a job, because you need to come up with a lot of examples. Like in these interviews, they will ask you, like, tell me about a data project, tell me about a time where you influenced the team, like all of these. So it's good to have some examples. I worked like in a student consultancy for 2.5 years. And even though it's not directly related to data science, you still do a lot of like analysis there, a market analysis and so on. And so that also kind of like helped me, I think, have a couple of like examples in these job interviews. Yeah, so those are a couple of things.
Interesting. Yeah. Another question that I can see is that would you say that your degree, like your MBA and your undergrad, really played a big role in you getting the job? I know like people downplay degrees and say that you don't really need to have like a degree in a tech specific field to get a job in tech.
Yeah.
Would you say it really played a big role?
I think for me, it played a big role. And I'm not saying that like it has to be. I think actually I know a lot of people who got a similar job with like a boot camp or self-trained skills. But for me personally, I think it played a very big role in that, I mean, only through my degree, I would have like gotten a job in the US. Like otherwise I wouldn't, probably it would have been like impossible from Germany to apply in the US and get a job there without a visa, because through your master's you actually also get a visa to work in the US for 3 years after that if you work in like a STEM related field. So it gave me the visa, it gave me like time to build a network, and it also gave me the relevant skills. As I said before, like data analytics only I learned about in my master's. And so probably if I wouldn't have done that, like I wouldn't have been exposed to it. So for me personally, the master's was key. But I think there are other ways to do it. I still think like probably people prefer like in a university degree over the other, like a boot camp or certificate. If you have a boot camp or certificate, you probably need to show more practical experience in other areas. So it's definitely like doable. You just need to like show some other practical experience in other jobs, internships, or projects. But yeah, definitely doable also without a degree.
Yeah, I think you answered the other questions in the live chat.
Cool.
So I think I'm not sure if anyone else has a question. Yeah. Anyways, so going forward, what do you see for yourself? Do you think you will stay in the United States? Do you see yourself going back to Germany? Do you see yourself like what do you think you're gonna be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'll stay in the US for a little bit longer. I don't have like a specific time frame in mind. But definitely like I think I want to get more exposure to product management. So I mean right now I'm doing it in a data related context, but actually I would also not mind moving out of the data related context. I mean data will always be important as a product manager because you also need to analyze like your success metrics, your user behavior. But I think more longer term, I would be interested in like going back to like a more consumer facing company, just because I personally feel like you have a bigger impact there, or you can feel the impact a little more directly. And I think longer term, starting my own thing, I really want to start something, either if it's like a tech startup or some sort of business, but I really just love having ownership and being my own boss. And so that definitely, I think, is something I want to do in the future as well. Not sure if it'll happen the next few, like 2-3 years, but at some point, I'm pretty sure that I want to at least try it out and explore it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, those are my questions. This was amazing. And yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun.
Okay. Thank
Awesome.
you.
See you. Have a good Sunday.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so thank you everyone. I hope you learned something and I will see you next time. Bye.